Welcome to For FF's Sake. Evan Harris here, and I got a guest for you guys today that I'm really excited about. You're in my top three favorite Ians that I've had on the show, by the way. Ian Hartitz, quick intro. Welcome to the show. He's the lead fantasy analyst for PFF.com, Pro Football Focus, co-host of the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast, which is one of my go-tos listening to. Does that with Dwayne McFarland, the self-appointed president of the Cordarelle Patterson fan club, and my king of Twitter for the fantasy football landscape, Ian Hartitz. Ian, thank you for joining.
My goodness, man, you must have had some good Ians on the show, but top three in anything isn't the worst thing in the world. I actually had a stat this offseason I threw out there where I think it was like drop rate, and it was like Debo Samuel, Tyreek Hill, and like Laviska Shenault. So it was like, look, everyone, Visca's top three. Like, what more do you want here? Who cares? Who cares what the stat's saying? He's top three with that company, right? Can't be a bad thing, but nah, man, it's good to be on here. And yeah, just about – this is like the primary redraft week for everyone out there, and then we are officially in week one. I was writing up my week one quarterback article earlier. It's good to just be able to look at some matchups again, man, and just grind some of that old film and get after. It's been a long off season, but a good one. Happy to just finally get some real important football being played here soon, though.
Well, my co-host on our debate shows his name is Ian Steele, so he's third on that list. So you're actually top two. So
okay, I'll take it.
I do like to ask guests, especially that join the show, just something a little bit different from what we're going to talk about for the main topic of the show. So I wanted to ask you, how did you get into content creation and fantasy football as a whole?
Yeah, I played football in college briefly for the University of Chicago, just D3. I was never flirting with the NFL or anything like that. But got hit in the head a few too many times where I didn't think it was really worth it playing anymore, and just had a big hole in my life my sophomore year. You play something and devote all that time to something for over a decade, and I always just did love football even from the beginning. So started reaching out to a bunch of just content guys in the industry because I had read enough articles, and at some point just kind of thought I could maybe do it. So emailed a bunch of people, just said, hey, I'll research articles for free. You guys can write them. Seems like a pretty good deal to me. Eventually one Jonathan Bales, who now just making millions in crypto. I don't know how crypto's doing these days, but I'm sure Jonathan's fine doing his thing. But back in the day, he was really, really involved day to day with fantasy. So did a lot of good stuff with him over the years, just really grinded my dick off for a while. Was lucky enough to get some opportunities, and here we are. So shout out to Jonathan, Roto World, Fantasy Lab, and some other people that helped me along the way. But really, man, I'm 29 now, and I'd say since I was about 19 or 20, man, it's been something where article some of those years maybe every week, but more lately I feel like every single day. So just trying to keep on keeping on, and I think you put enough time into this industry and you do have good work, eventually you'll be able to shine through.
Man, that's awesome. And I mentioned earlier, your Twitter is a must follow. Even if you are not a fantasy football guy, you got to follow. You'll get some laughs out of it. You make me feel a little bit vindicated for just being hard on some guys. I'm like, yep, that's my guy. I'm going to hold on to that. My guy right now is Rashod White, who has seen better days in his hype journey, but I believe it's going to pan out. So I'm gonna stick to that one.
He has good handcuff appeal and everything. Like, I don't know who else would really get it in that backfield. We did see with a lot of these rookie running backs, though, Algier, Spiller, White, they just probably shouldn't have been going like top 40, top 45 among running backs when they were. We do this every single season with the rookies, and sometimes it works out, man. But, even someone like Isaiah Pacheco, like just misinterpreting the whole kind of thing. Like, someone that can be drafted. But to me, the whole Pacheco hype train was more so like, all right, chill the hell out on Ronald Jones. It wasn't like, oh, look at this 7th round rookie that's going to take Clyde Edwards-Hilaire's job. So, but you know what? For every one of those, now I guess we got Dameon Pierce actually taking the starting job. So it's one of those things where, over the last 10 years, only been 5 rookie running backs that weren't drafted on day 1 or day 2 actually become a top 24 PPR back. So it's kind of knowing that and then not getting sucked into the hype too much with, the flavor of the year, basically, with some of these other rookie running backs coming along. But hey, a lot of 3-down candidates out there. I'm sure by week 9, week 10, we'll have a different feel. But I guess that's my thing, man. Like, we all saw Dearness Johnson last year come in. He had the 2 or 3, like, legit top 5 weeks. And okay, love Dearness Johnson. He's still a 4.8 40 guy. I think I would be hard pressed to find a single person before last season that had much good to say about his running style. But when it came time to play him, it was like, oh, Chubb and Hunter out. This dude's gonna get 25 touches. But then, July, August, we're like, oh, look at the vision here. Look at the, the PFF pass blocking grade from college. So I know those things can help us find it out, but it is funny to me how running back in particular, once September's here, we only seem to care about the opportunity. I think sometimes we get lost in the weeds before then.
Yeah, we all play fantasy football because we want to be smarter than our buddies and prove it. And sometimes we go out on a limb early on in the preseason. But hey, we're getting into the season, right? And that's what this show is about. We're going to look at some guys that, if you're a trade addict, these are guys you may want to target right now before week 1. And these are some guys that, hey, if you're still having redrafts, maybe you snag them right at ADP or a round earlier if you can, because we see their value potentially rising. So you can argue either side of this, or we can just be positive about it, however we want to do it. But I got a list of some guys here, and we're going to start off with one that I know I've heard you talk about in the past, somebody that I think's kind of being slept on. And you made a comment on a podcast. I'll actually bring this up. If you draft DeAndre Hopkins, so some people are like, who's he about to talk to? If you draft DeAndre Hopkins, you can snag this guy several rounds later, and he can be your answer until Hopkins is ready. I think he has appeal, even if he only performs at ADP, but I think he's going to outperform it, and that is Rondale Moore. So we'll start with him. And Ian, I'll let you take it away to start this one.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. He's going outside like the top 50 or even 60 receivers, depending on the draft year. And it's like nothing has really changed with him this year compared to last year in terms of his ADP. In reality, you could argue his two biggest target competitions, and Christian Kirk and Chase Edmonds, they're both gone. And with Rondale, man, I really think like his best case scenario could be 100, 110 targets and like another 20 or so rush attempts, like almost like the Robert Woods special, but being used as more of a pure gadgety running back, not just getting kind of the fly sweeps that Bobby Trees was so good at in the McVay system. So with Rondale, man, just having, again, what I believe is going to be Kyler Murray's starting slot receiver that freaking late. It's the same reason why, not to spoil the whole list, but someone like Isaiah McKenzie is up there. Like there's a handful of offenses that you should really be concerned about the number 3 receiver, and if they can provide some fantasy value. But they're out there, and a lot of them are going under the radar, man. Rondale, Tyler Boyd, Russell Gage at this point. Like, okay, Julio's there. I get it. Doesn't mean he has to now go like wide receiver 58 or whatever he's going out there on the ADP circuit. So, Joshua Palmer, there's a couple of these guys. KJ Hamler looked healthy in the preseason. So really, I fully understand, some of these receivers. Like, yeah, we have some holes in Rondale's game, and there is an opportunity where maybe Hopkins comes back, and for some reason, because they did it last year, they keep AJ Green and Antoine Wesley on one side, and they slide Marquise Brown to the slot. Like, I recognize that's a possibility, but clearly that's being baked into the price here, and it's why a day 2 guy who was freaking getting, I remember my guy Austin Gale now at the Ringer, he comped Rondale Moore to like Calvin Johnson stuck in Cole Beasley's body. Like, let's not completely give up on this guy who, it's not like he did nothing last year. We didn't love the average target depth, and we didn't love that he didn't get the ball more, but within his opportunities, I thought Rondale Moore showed a lot of good things. It wasn't like Andy Isabella, like, my God, like the guy couldn't even fetch a target. Good little preseason for Isabella, by the way, but maybe coming a little bit too late. But yeah, so Rondale Moore for me, again, someone that at a minimum with the Hopkins kind of thing in mind, because I've enjoyed drafting Nuke a lot, especially, round 7, round 8 when he slides. Oh, God, I love when the lights go out. That means it's a good thing. But yeah, basically get Rondale literally 3-4 rounds later. There's your Hopkins, stopgate there. And I understand like stacking the guys in the same team sometimes is frowned upon, but that's more like when you draft Zeke in round 3 and Tony Pollard in round 7, and like if Pollard does well, then your 3rd round pick's not doing well. It's a little bit different when you're talking about like really cementing a legit wide receiver with your 8th and 12th round picks.
Yeah, I think something that's not talked about enough with Rondale Moore is we all want to talk about, okay, who's going to get the pass catching work that Chase Edmonds isn't going to get now because he's not there. And so
Rondale, baby.
When Darrell Williams got signed, I'm like, no, that's probably not going to happen. And Eno Benjamin, I think, could have a role, but I think it's going to be Rondale, or it could, more likely than not, could be, because you go back to tape last year and look at the attempts out of the backfield he got and the snaps out of the backfield, the handoffs. Like, he legitimately, everybody's chasing the next Debo, and I'm not going to even go that far. But he could have a similar role if he's just expanded on what he had last year. So I'm enticed there and really shocked. I thought the hype would push him up drafts, and it's not. So we'll move on to another guy here, a guy that I'm really high on. Switch gears to Rashod Bateman. Rashod Bateman has a true alpha build coming out of college. I thought could have been, I thought he was the wide receiver 2 in last year's draft under my metric. I didn't have him ahead of Chase, but I did have him ahead of guys like Waddle and Devontae Smith, who obviously had solid rookie seasons. Waddle better than the latter. But Rashod Bateman for me is a guy that he's locked into that wide receiver 1 role. They traded away Marquise Brown, who had a great season last year, because obviously they believe in this guy. And he's got I think it was a 25% target share last year for Marquise Brown. Even if he doesn't get all of that target share, he still stands to get a big increase in targets. He was a guy who was torching their number 1 corner, Marlon Humphrey, as a rookie in camp, and then had the injury, and everything kind of stepped back. Looked good on the field. Rashod Bateman is a guy for me that I think could have a big week 1, and then it's back to where, you're not going to be able to trade for this guy.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's one of those things where when Hollywood got traded, again, just as I kind of know these ADPs throughout the offseason just because I'm doing it all year round. And you still see it in best ball land a little bit. We're like over at Underdog. He's wide receiver 26. But my God, man, like it's August 29th. When are we able to go into kind of the home league ADP? As long as we're doing it now, I see him right now. Fantasy Pros consensus ADP, wide receiver 38. Like, okay, this is again one of those things where Mark Andrews is there, probably the de facto 1, but okay, it's still an offense where J.K. Dobbins is probably getting eased back in. Gus Edwards is on the pup. The Ravens can talk all they want about partying like it's 2019 and running the ball again, man. I don't think they have the bodies to do so. And then we're looking at Rashod Bateman potentially walking back into that 140, 150 target role that the Ravens literally traded Marquise Brown away just so they could elevate Bateman. They didn't make a single other move at wide receiver this offseason. Like James Proche might unironically start in 3 wide receiver sets for this team. And Isaiah Likely, the 4th round tight end. That's like our freaking competition that we have to worry about for Rashod Bateman at this point. So, we're not going to get into the Lamar Jackson passing slander. He gave Marquise more than enough opportunities. Yeah. I mean, I think we all saw Warren Sharp's, 2-minute ode to just all the drops and missed opportunities that Marquise had. And he was still producing, well above this current spot that Bateman's being drafted at. So Rashod Bateman, every time that I kind of, with people's drafts having up, I looked at my rankings versus ESPN versus Yahoo, and just I've done a couple of drafts myself, and he's someone that we're used to in best ball land and high stakes. Like he's usually going like round 5 or so, and that's a pretty good spot for him. I think you can get him so much later than these other ones, man, where it's like I didn't mean like I like Bateman, but I think kind of wide receiver 26 to 28 or so, that's a pretty good spot. Like he's not someone that I necessarily came into this year like I need to be high on him, but it's the way it worked out. And if you're going to give me the guy at a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 price, I am in.
Yeah, it's laughable to say the least. And one of the biggest things, I think, if you are not creating rankings for yourself, or at least following somebody's rankings that you believe in, you need to do it, because do not draft based off NFL, Yahoo, even sleeper ADP sometimes. Okay. We'll jump through here. I know we don't have a ton of time, and I want to get to as many of these guys as we can. I'm going to jump over to a running back really quickly, because this is somebody who I targeted in drafts, Ian, and I guess other people were high on him too. Like I didn't snag him where I thought I was going to be able to. I'm buying into the hype a little bit on Nyheim Hines. I think Nyheim Hines could have a decent role in this offense. When you look back at their head coach when he was with the Eagles, Boston Scott was the number 2 running back there and had a role there, especially late in, I think it was the 2019 season that made Miles Sanders a first-round pick the following year, so maybe that's a bad comparison. But Nyheim Hines is a pass-catching back teaming up with a guy who likes to dump it off in Matt Ryan. We saw what that did with another guy we're going to talk about, Cordarelle Patterson, last year, getting those targets, getting that opportunity. I think he has flex appeal every single week, and if something does happen to Jonathan Taylor, he's a guy you can't buy at all. I think he is being drafted way too low right now, and he's a guy I want on my fantasy team if I can get him.
I think it's just more reason having guys like Nyheim Hines, A little bit more expensive, but the Cordarelle Patterson, Kareem Hunt, Chase Edmonds tier, like there's more running backs. And Darrell Henderson's a guy going right by Hines, Michael Carter. And like there's these flex with benefits type guys, Jamal Williams as well. We can get these guys in rounds like 10 through 12. So I've been loving, man. My favorite strategy, almost regardless of format, is getting one or two running backs early, the hero RB or the superhero RB, whatever you want to call the strategy. I refuse to call it modified zero RB. It's the dumbest name in our freaking industry. But you get one or two running backs early. You scoop up all these amazing wide receivers that are usually there until, round 6, round 7. You have opportunities to get a great tight end or, the quarterbacks in round 6. And you still have these upside running backs like Nyheim Hines waiting for you. I think it's unique to this year, and I fully plan to keep on taking advantage of it because Hines, maybe in full PPR, just based on Matt Ryan and some of the things Frank Reich has said throughout this offseason. And, we always say, the running back that's going to play more in the slot. I will say Hines and Tony Pollard are two. There's two things you need for that to actually happen. The running back has to be able to do it. Okay, rare instance where I think they can. And you have to have a wide receiver depth chart so weak that it can actually warrant it. And once again, in Indy and Dallas, these are two teams that we've been begging to sign someone else, and they continue to not really do so. So for Hines, I do think there's a chance that he has some standalone value where he can be maybe a weekly RB3 in PPR scoring. But to your point earlier about Jonathan Taylor getting hurt, I earlier in the offseason thought of Hines more as like a J.D. McKissick where the lead guy goes down and nothing really changes because that's really what happened in the past when Marlon Mack got hurt. Jordan Wilkins was kind of the primary beneficiary, not Nyheim Hines. Well, at least in the preseason, man, we don't really care about performance, but we care about those first team reps. And without Jonathan Taylor in there, Hines was getting every single snap next to Matt Ryan, like not Phillip Lindsay, who was being used as a clear backup. So I don't think Hines would like all of a sudden just 90% snaps take over the Jonathan Taylor role, but he doesn't need that, man. I think at a minimum, Hines could have that Austin Eckler, Alvin Kamara role if Taylor was completely out of the picture. And that's really, almost ideal. It's the next best thing we can get to one of the most fantasy-friendly workloads in fantasy. So I will certainly take that out of Nyheim Hines.
Kind of on that note, they don't have another guy built like Jonathan Taylor on that roster right now. So there's not really somebody to step into that role. The offense would have to slightly shift. So I think it's one of the better handcuffs. I love the term flex with benefits. I'm going to totally use that, I think, in the league this year. Let's go to one of your guys, and I love that he's one of your guys because Tennessee fan, probably see the Tennessee stuff in the background here. He was a good one, and he's finally got an opportunity in the NFL. And despite making the most of it, Ian, he's getting drafted not in the first, second, third, fourth. I'm seeing him go like after the 8th round, Cordarelle Patterson.
Yeah, it's absurd, man. Again, I hope the listeners are like, oh, you guys love everyone. We're talking about cheap players that you can get in fantasy here, and that's the ideal part here. Like, my God, man, I go on every radio show, and it's just like, oh, McCaffrey or Taylor. It's like, you know what? You have either Christian McCaffrey or Jonathan Taylor on your fantasy team. Like, who cares at this point? Even your first 3-4 rounds, man. Like, yeah, you're going to be freaking stacked. You're picking from top 50 players. So I like that we're going through guys like legit going outside the top 100 picks that I think are ultimately going to lead your team a lot better. It's easy to look good in the first 4 or 5 rounds of your draft. Usually the second half is where you start missing out. And again, having Cordarelle Patterson, even Melvin Gordon in there, man, Kareem Hunt, these running backs are going to be awfully hard, at least in Patterson Hunt's case, to keep out of the top 24 the second that week 1 is here, which don't look now, but it is almost here. I mean, CPAT, legit top 7 running back per game before he sprained his ankle against the Cowboys. He comes back, he plays through the pain. It's unfortunate that we hold, that against guys like CPAT and Zeke, but when Derrick Henry and DeAndre Swift just missed time, we're like, oh, whatever, they were hurt, Patterson was hurt too, man. He was just playing through it. Even then, man, he was still a top 30 running back while playing hurt with a lesser workload because, their season was over and he was hurt. So RB 37 over underdog. Cordarelle Patterson with the Dameon Pierce hype train moving is literally the cheapest starting running back in all of fantasy football. So it's similar to the Amon-Ra St. Brown thing, man. It's like people are worried like, oh, he's not going to be able to match that super high, like short stretch he had. Well, yeah, if we had to draft Patterson as the RB7 or RB8, I might have some concerns. But again, literally an RB4 territory. I don't know how you can't get behind CPAT. Again, he is a godsend for rosters that are loaded at wide receiver early and only have a running back or two once you get to round 9 or 10.
So before the show is posted, I may try to go make a trade in a redraft league for Cordarelle Patterson because I do have Algier that I got, I think, like almost 11th or 12th round in that draft. And the more I think about it, the more I'm just like, man, Algier really ain't going to get that role, is he? It's going to be Patterson's role unless something happens. So I think Dynasty Algier has some value, but I'm a little worried about this year. Maybe I can flip that for a trade. But you got me spinning now, Ian. Come on. Let's go to a guy that I think is going to have defensive spinning. He steps into a role that was very valuable last year and just so happens to be with one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Isaiah McKenzie shot up and was trending there for a while. I think it just kind of settled back down. And we talk about these guys you can get outside the top 100 picks that have flex with benefits upside. That could be Isaiah McKenzie as he steps into a role that saw Cole Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders look like weekly starts for your team last year.
Yeah, I mean, Beasley, I know people are in love with the guy for some of his off-field choices, but let's not act like he wasn't a great, fantasy contributor the last 3 seasons. I mean, Cole Beasley, one of only 10 players to have at least 100 targets in each of the past 3 seasons. And that's potentially what McKenzie's looking at. And when he got re-signed earlier in the offseason, it wasn't too much money at all. So we just kind of figured that it wasn't going to be like a starting sort of role because the money didn't match that. And then they signed Jamison Crowder. Well, he didn't get any money either. And they made it through the draft and only took Shakir in the 5th round. So yeah, with Gabriel Davis and Isaiah McKenzie, it's like, well, how come they couldn't do it before? And it's like, well, the players that were ahead of them on the depth chart are no longer there. And Buffalo has given us every indication that Gabe and McKenzie are going to be those guys. So once we can accept that Gabriel Davis and Isaiah McKenzie are starting, because that's what we've seen the entire offseason and in the preseason now, we have Josh Allen's number 2 and number 3 wide receivers. So like, regardless of even knowing anything about McKenzie's yak ability and some of the things he did last year against the Patriots with his full-time role, like just by virtue of being able to get a top 3 target for Josh Allen outside the top 60, 70 players at his position sometimes, that's the only case you need for Isaiah McKenzie, man. I kid you not, looking at this ADP right now, Fantasy Pros, like Odell Beckham is going before Isaiah McKenzie, Sammy Watkins, Robbie Anderson, like no. So I always say like PFF.com, I have my top 10 tips for fantasy drafts. And one of the things I noticed, like, don't get too cute early. And that just means don't make big ADP stretches because there's a chance that, the guy you're looking for can always come back to you early. I think the ADPs are much sharper in the first, half of a draft. Once you start getting to the hundreds or so, that's when it's a situation where like, okay, go get your Isaiah McKenzie after the top 50 wide receivers are gone. And again, I think he stands out right there. He's honestly like Isaiah McKenzie is like what everyone is hoping like someone like Jalen Tolbert and Joshua Palmer can be, and he's somehow going cheaper than him.
Yeah. I had 2 12-team redraft drafts over the weekend, and he went undrafted in one of those.
He's free. Exactly.
He's free right now, and you have that opportunity. All right, so let's jump again here. We'll jump back over to running backs, and I got 2 on the list here, but I want to talk about Chase Edmonds. Chase Edmonds, perceivably the RB1 in Miami by all accounts. We talked about cheapest starting running backs on a team. His ADP has started to creep up a little bit, I think, as we've gotten closer to the season, but still going well outside the top, 20 running backs. I don't have my rankings in front of me. And a guy that, if he's in that offense, the Kyle Shanahan offense that's been carried over to Miami as a running back in that scheme, he could do a lot of good things. I feel like Chase Edmonds, his draft stock is kind of being impacted by the fact that he lost his job last year to James Conner. Like, everybody was so ready for Edmonds to break out last year, and he had a solid year, but it wasn't what everybody expected, and now here he is in another role. He was the highest paid and priority running back in free agency, and it's just like, oh, okay, well, he's there, and I'll get him if I can.
Yeah, to be fair, I mean, it really was more of a 50-50 split with him and Connor, and then Edmonds. Yeah. I believe he sprained his – okay, no, he messed up his – Oh my goodness, he had a lot of injuries at the end of last year. Originally, he had a shoulder issue, and then he had an ankle sprain, then he had a back injury, and then he had a rib injury. So with Edmonds, I think the concern has always been like, what exactly is going to be this Miami backfield with Mike McDaniel coming from the Shanahan coaching tree? We know it can be obviously a productive environment for a running back, but with Edmonds, while Arizona has given him like a true every down role at different points, Kingsbury's kind of been willing to do that with all of his running backs. So I think Edmonds just suffers from a little bit of the like scat back. Can he really handle the early down workload? But hey, they paid him to do it. Sony Michel, who was looking like a real candidate to work inside that committee, got cut today. So right now it's looking like Chase Edmonds, Raheem Mostert, maybe Gaskin's getting some work there, but it's a brand new coaching staff that I would just imagine isn't quite valuing Gaskin as highly as the old one that obviously made him a far more featured part of the weekly plan. So Edmonds projects as the lead back of a 2, maybe 3 back committee. Yeah, I think the ball's going to go elsewhere a lot in the passing game to Tyreek and Waddle especially, but still possible for Edmonds to beat the number 3 or number 4 in this passing game. And he's a pass-catching, explosive running back. Like, that's what makes Dre McFarland and myself talk about this on the podcast about the RB dead zone. And the two, I think, characteristics of the dead zone, which is, I would say, like kind of later round 4 into like kind of round 6. It's one, there's really good wide receivers and even quarterbacks and the occasional Kittle available in that range. So like, you don't want to just fill up your running back spots, just to fill up your running back spots when there's significantly better players at the other positions. And 2, you just have a lot of guys like your Jacobs, Antonio Gibsons, J.K. Dobbins of the world, these early down running backs unfortunately don't catch passes, and we're playing in full or even half PPR. You know, it's the game we play. We got to do this. So if Edmonds is going to get up into that range, I probably prefer him to those guys straight up at this point. I'm still not sure if I'm going to take him round 5 because, you know, Edmonds versus Amon-Ra St. Brown, that's a different question here. Edmonds versus Kyler Murray, I'm probably leaning with the other guys still because I'm, again, confident still enough in the other running backs going that late. But, again, Edmonds, Hunt, Cordarelle Patterson, like these guys going round 8 or 9. And I think, man, unless if you're listening to this and you're like not in the – you know, you're not paying like $350 for your league entry fee. If it's just kind of a regular ESPN Yahoo league with your friends, I think there really is a chance that Edmonds could continue to slide. So once again, the round 7, round 8, I am smashing draft on Edmonds.
I think he's a cheap buy right now, and a guy you can get in a package, right? If you drafted a running back a little earlier that maybe you're not really high on, but you felt the value was there, Edmonds is a guy you can go get and package with another receiver if you're receiver light. So I like him as a trade target right now before week 1, because week 1 could change everything. We got time for one more guy. We were going to touch on Dameon Pierce, but to be honest, he's been talked about a lot right now, and he was not named. Non-committal was Lovie Smith. It's okay. The Texans are going to be non-committal with him after this year, probably. We're going to go.
What was that signing, man? The dude went 17-39 at Illinois. He comes back and is a defensive coordinator for 1 year, and they're a bottom 6 defense by like every metric. I mean, my goodness. And I know Lovey had his day with the Bears and everything, but like just how he got a job, like a head coaching job again after that. Like, how far do you have to go back to find the last like positive thing that Lovey's done? So I get it. His worst day, he knows more about football in his little finger than I ever will. It's just, just again, objectively looking at the process, like, come on, even Texans fans gotta know. Like, it's pretty ridiculous.
I'm convinced that he went to the GM and was like, "Look, I'll retire after this year. Y'all are just in a mess right now, and you need to hire me so you can hire the quarterback, the backup quarterback who has no coaching experience next year." Like, that's
them and the Bears, man. Like, you just look at their offseason signings, and it's just littered with these 1-year deals with these washed-up veterans, and it's really unfortunate for the Bears because, like, you have your first-round quarterback. These should be the years where ideally you're paying up everywhere because you have the cost-control quarterback, hopefully learning to operate at an elite level. But let's find out if he can be that guy. Like, regardless, I understand Davis Mills wasn't necessarily drafted to be that guy, but, man, couldn't do anything at any of these positions. Like, really, like, that's Dameon Pierce. Of course, he took over that running back room. Why was that the running back room? Really, man, nothing else. That's just the Houston Texans organization.
We're not getting rid of Brandon Cooks. It's okay. All right, so last guy we'll talk about, just to throw him in here because tight ends are people too. We don't have to spend a lot of time, but Irv Smith. And admittedly, I didn't add the junior in there. Sorry, Irv Smith.
Oh.
But admittedly, I've never rostered Irv Smith, but I feel like right now, especially just going through my redrafts, he's a guy that is really lowly valued in previous leagues. Like, in previous years, we've expected him to have that breakout, and it just hasn't happened yet because of injury. but he goes into a really good offense. Everybody talks about, well, Justin Jefferson getting the Cooper Kupp role in that offense. What about Irv Smith getting the Tyler Higbee role from a couple seasons ago? Like, can that happen? So what are your thoughts on Irv Smith for early in the season and just as a value right now in redraft?
Yeah, everyone kind of came around to, I think, what you're talking about by the time week 1 did, because Irv was constantly a great late round tight end during, the months of the summer, because they only added Johnny Munt as the number 2. Johnny Munt was Tyler Higbee's backup in Los Angeles under now Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell, who was Sean McVay's offensive coordinator. So trying to keep up here, everyone. With, again, Higbee having the every down role, that now looks like it's going to 100% beat Irv Smith, not just because of the offense, but again, because Munt's the only backup, and they didn't draft anyone meaningful there. So the only thing that's changed with Irv Smith is he messed up his thumb early in August. And yeah, it's unfortunate. We obviously never want our fantasy players to be injured, but it happened. And Kevin O'Connell, man, it's just been steadfast that week 1 is fine. Like, it's well within his range of outcomes, if not expected at this point. And because of that, Irv Smith has gone from someone that was like really the first tight end off the board behind Dawson Knox. There's basically 10 tight ends to kind of feel good about. Now he's just kind of in that muddled range, going with more guys like David Njoku and Gerald Everett. I think they are perfectly fine targets too. I was joking around with Hayden Winks over Underdog Fantasy. It's almost like crazy, man. Like, the tight ends, like 11 through 15, you can argue are worse than like 16 through 20 at this point. We have guys like Pat Freiermuth, Mike Gesicki, Cole Kmet, Noah Fant still somehow. Like, these guys are somehow being pushed up while we got Njoku, Irv Smith, Evan Ingram, Tyler Higbee himself. Those guys are all going to have every down roles. If we're trying to find this year's version of, Dawson Knox or Robert Tonyan from a few years back, it's like the talented tight end in an offense with a quarterback who could throw 30 plus touchdowns because they're good and they're in the offense for it. Now, maybe they're not going to be featured, but because of the talent at hand in the offense, we have reason to believe the tight end converts, 8 to 10 touchdowns out of 70 or so target share. I think Irv Smith or Kirk Cousins, who, yeah, Kirk's okay, everyone. He's put up the counting numbers. All these great seasons these wide receivers have, you got to give Kirk a little bit of credit for that. Irv counts with Kirk Cousins. Gerald Everett's right there with Justin Herbert. I think Higbee's there with Matthew Stafford. Tonyan, as long as he's healthy, is there with Aaron Rodgers. And Hayden Hurst is there with Joe Burrow. So, again, a lot of interesting late-round options. Now, we say this every year, and then we get into like week 3, and it's like, damn it, I wish I just would have taken a top 5 tight end. But hey, when they're going this cheap, I just think it affords you the ability in a draft not to panic. And if you don't get your Zach Ertz or Dawson Knox, like, don't take Pat Freiermuth at pick 112. Take Irv Smith at pick 155, because once you're in that point of the draft, again, it's really important not to chase it. Look at the value, look at arbitrage versions, and I think Irv is the late round tight end in 2022.
Ian, really appreciate you coming on. If you enjoyed the show, like, subscribe. I always forget to ask people. Go check out Ian on Twitter, Hartitz. You will not be disappointed. And again, thank you very much, man.
All good, man.
Thank you for listening. Follow For FF's Sake on all social media platforms and search for us wherever you get your podcasts.